the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Are you ready for your Do You Hear Yourself moment of the week?
Yep.
UK PM two-tier Keir Starmer asked about the British Supreme Court's ruling that, wait for it,
Okay.
a man pretending to be a woman is not a woman.
Do you believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, I think the Supreme Court has answered that question.
So you don't believe a trans woman is a woman?
Look, a woman is an adult female, and the Court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. So I think it's important that we see the judgment for what it is. It's a welcome step forward. It's real clarity in an area where we did need clarity. I'm pleased it's come about. We need to move and make sure that we now ensure that all guidance is in the right place according to that judgment.
Do you hear yourself?
I welcome the British Supreme Court decision too. I mean, they're doing better than Ketanji Brown Jackson, but the idea that this was an area we needed real clarity. I mean, Starmer cannot bring himself to answer the question, no. Is a trans woman a woman? No. No, that person is a man pretending to be a woman. That's what it is. That's what that person is doing for whatever reason. That you can't. It was so confusing. We lived in such a confusing time until the British Supreme Court weighed in. The politicians and policymakers in the UK had no idea what to do. Speaking of Ketanji Brown Jackson, this was an interesting exchange in the Mahmoud v. Taylor case that we talked about a bit earlier in the week. This is the case that the Supreme Court took up out of Montgomery County, Maryland, in which a group of parents, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, came together to sue the school for not allowing an opt-out for their kids in the primary grades. I'm talking like 0 to 5.
Yeah.
Where they were being compelled to consume all this sort of graphic, in some cases, LGBTQ propaganda.
Right.
This is Ketanji Brown Jackson's exchange on the topic. The Supreme Court Justice, to refresh your recollection, in case you forgot, who has no idea what a woman is. Maybe she needs to read that British Supreme Court opinion.
And I guess I'm struggling to see how it burdens a parent's religious exercise if the school teaches something that the parent disagrees with. You have a choice. You don't have to send your kid to that school. You can put them in another situation.
Oh, okay. Sounds like school choice.
If you don't like it, leave.
Yeah.
But I understand.
Where do we go?
I understand, right, from her fellow travelers who oppose school choice that people can't just pick up and move. That they're undeserving of resources that would provide them the freedom that wealthier people have because they're opposed to school choice. We need to invest in the neighborhood school. So the neighborhood school, I mean, that would be what they say. Oh, the neighborhood school, the neighborhood school, the neighborhood school. That's what the teachers union say. That's what Ketanji Brown Jackson believes. And now it's, if you don't like it, leave. But if you don't like it, leave is their attitude about everything, including your constitutional rights, like free exercise of your faith. What a moment that was. Ketanji Brown Jackson continues to demonstrate herself to be a DEI hire. Our next guest, concluding riff in an op-ed she published at Spiked Online. One day we might well laugh at the collective lunacy that gripped the early 21st century, but not yet. First, we need to ask the people who indulged it, what the hell were you thinking? or as J.D. Vance said, do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you're saying? For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Jo Bartosch, journalist campaigning for the rights of women and girls. Jo, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me.
So you were, I read from your op-ed at Spiked, you were in attendance at the rallying and railing against that British Supreme Court decision by, the full collection of identitarians.
So for full disclosure, I actually watched a live stream of it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I saw the whole thing effectively play out online. So yeah.
And what did you see?
So it was a really shocking display of rage and entitlement by trans activists who were chanting. I will spare your listeners the language, but F. J.K. Rowling, F. Wes Keating, who's our House Secretary. They were carrying really offensive banners. They defaced statues of some of our sort of feminist heroes, if you like, or heroines. So Millicent Fawcett, and they really sort of made a very angry display of power, if you like. And what they were raging at was the Supreme Court ruling, which you referenced earlier, which essentially said, all it said was that sex in law is biological. We all knew that, but because of these lobby groups, because they've infiltrated British institutions, as I understand they have done in the US as well, there has been a huge pushback from these entitled brats, basically, from these entitled. And they had what was in fact a temper tantrum through the streets of London, and the campaigns against the Supreme Court ruling are ongoing. Yet, really, they haven't got a leg to stand on, because all it has done is clarify the law, which is, funnily enough, based in reality, that men and women are different and that women need protections from men in certain circumstances.
The response from, there's some great color in the response that you wrote about, the responses from the various speakers and participants. Oh, boy. But unsurprising, because we've been watching this on college campuses and in response to election results or court decisions that these identitarians don't care for. But I wonder if you think that the High Court's decision in the UK and the resulting fallout is changing the larger populace's attitude about these issues, even if they were opposed to things like men and girls sports, or girls spaces. They were, they may have been reticent to step forward. Do you get the sense that public opinion is starting to move away from this lunacy that you described?
Yeah, the public has been lied to. We've been let down by our national broadcaster, the BBC, who have referred repeatedly to, for example, male sex offenders by female pronouns if they identify as women. So they've had a number done on them. And I think this ruling has empowered people to begin to just tell the truth. People were too scared to like Facebook posts in case they lost their jobs. There's been a real rule of terror by these sort of psychotic identitarians. So I think we are now starting to see a return to sanity and common sense, but institutions are still struggling to deal with this very basic ruling. So we've seen the Law Society has put forward some very confusing and contradictory guidance, claiming that they need to wait for the Equality and Human Rights Commission to give them further guidance about what a man and a woman means. We've seen various universities release statements saying that they're sort of stand in solidarity with their trans brothers and sisters and all that sort of nonsense. So we have seen sort of institutions rail against it, but there is now at least an acknowledgement that that something does have to change, and that, in fact, but they haven't quite got so far as to recognise that change essentially just means reverting to biological reality as the law was always intended.
What about the, the use of pronouns like they, them? Is that going to go away too now? Or will that always be in our culture? I
think the coverage, so I have seen a shift. So for years, I've just been saying men, when people have identified as trans women, I've called them men, and I've used he. And sometimes I would have sort of editors, not at sites, but at different publications, push back against that. And that has lessened. So we are now starting to see, because journalists have been told to use style guides, which were, again, produced by trans activist organisations. And we are now starting to see that, that the sort of mandatory, if you like, use of preferred pronouns is starting to be ebbed away at. The BBC are still referring to people by their preferred pronouns. But generally, I think politicians are being a lot more cautious. So we've seen, as I say, a total turnaround from our Prime Minister, who, as you rightly, you played a clip of him there saying that he agreed with the Supreme Court ruling, though he was still reticent to say that, a trans woman is in fact a man. He won't say that, but he will at least sort of defer to the ruling, which I think shows great cowardice on his part.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're used to we're used to that here too. Yeah, actually, that's where I wanted to go. Is I wonder, like we're watching some infighting with the Democrat Party here. There's a few politicians with presidential aspirations that are trying to at least reposition themselves as more moderate and step away from some of these cultural issues like trans men playing or trans women playing women's sports, but there's a real fight, and the side that's trying to moderate is losing, as far as I can tell. And I wonder if that fight is happening within the Labour Party as well.
Oh, hugely. So it's been interesting to see MPs that have been silent for years finally finding their voices and claiming that all along they really, held with women's rights campaigners and with reality. Because we have seen, for example, there's a very courageous MP who left the Labour Party because she was so badly bullied, because she said that, men can't be women, and that's Rosie Duffield, and she stuck to that line, and she was pushed out of Keir Starmer's Labour Party for making that exact point. So it must be particularly galling for her to suddenly see all of her, former colleagues turn around and say they in fact knew what a woman was all along. There's been a total turnaround. Obviously, some are still banging the trans activist drum, but I think they're increasingly seen as in the minority. There are lots of politicians now making claims about how both sides need to cool with the temperature of the debate and those sorts of things. But actually, the hostility and the anger has never come from those who believe in biological reality. I think it has entirely come from very, very angry and entitled activists, largely men who want to be seen as women. And I think probably, don't want to delve too much in the psychology of it, but I think that's probably because really they know that they're not. And I think they find any challenge to that very destabilizing, which frankly is their problem.
Jo Bartosch is a journalist campaigning for the rights of women and girls. Her piece at Spiked Online, A Trans Activist Temper Tantrum, is a fun read. Jo, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Chicagoland certified financial planning professional Tim Stearns discusses taxes in retirement.
Most people are paying more in taxes and keeping less of their money to live and do what they enjoy. That's why we've put out the retirement tax bill calculator online. You can see with your own eyes just how much you might be overpaying. It's a valuable tool, $500 value, but we made it free for you to view and run your own numbers at mvpcfp.com. That's mvpcfp.com.
To run your retirement tax bill calculator, go to mvpcfp.com.
Investment advisory services offered through Cornerstone Securities, LLC.
Have you seen our energy bill? You'd think Elon used our furnace to power his rocket ships.
Very funny, babe. That furnace is 20 years old and probably hasn't been cleaned in 10.
I'll have Air Right Heating and Cooling check it out. They've seen it all. Plus, there's still time to take advantage of federal rebates. They even give AM 560 listeners $56 off any service.
Visit Air Right Heating and Cooling today at air-rite.com. That's AIR-RITE.com. Air Right Heating and Cooling, doing it right since 1959.
You've heard us talk about our campaign this spring with Caring Network. They're a local pro-life organization based in Chicagoland, and they're working to prevent abortions in Illinois by reaching abortion-minded women with a message of life.